The clinking of silverware stopped the moment Patricia's voice cut through the dining room. Everyone else kept their eyes on their plates, but her words landed heavy, sharp, and cruel. "So, Elena," she said, her lips curling into a smile that wasn't kind at all, "do you ever feel out of place at this table? I mean, with all of us being, well, successful, accomplished, established. And you, what exactly is it you do again?" Her tone was casual, but it was meant to sting. The air tightened around the table. Someone coughed. Someone else sipped their wine too quickly. Elena sat frozen for a moment, her cheeks hot. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting to see how she would answer, or if she even could. She tried to steady her voice. "I work hard, Patricia. Maybe not in the way you approve of, but Patricia didn't let her finish. She gave a laugh, loud and sharp like breaking glass. "Hard work. My dear, working hard at something small doesn't make it big. It just makes it small and exhausting. Don't you agree, David?" Elena turned to her husband, praying silently that he would say something, anything, to defend her. David cleared his throat but only muttered, "Let's not start this now, Mom." His eyes never met hers. The silence after that was louder than any insult. Elena's fork trembled in her hand. The roast chicken on her plate blurred as her vision clouded. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the chair, to be anywhere but at that table. Patricia leaned back, clearly satisfied, sipping her wine as if she hadn't just broken someone open with her words. Around the table, David's siblings shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Not one person. Inside, Elena's heart pounded. She swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose," she said quietly, though her throat burned. The dinner continued, but it no longer felt like a meal. It was a stage, and Elena had just been humiliated in front of an unwilling audience. Each laugh that followed, each casual conversation, rang in her ears like echoes of Patricia's words. Small, exhausting, out of place. Elena held her head high, but under the table, her fists clenched. Something inside her shifted that night. She didn't know it yet, but Patricia's cruel remark would not be forgotten. It would become the spark that changed everything. Elena still remembered the first time she met David's family. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, and she had worn her best dress, the one she saved for special occasions. Her hands had trembled as she held the bouquet of flowers she brought for Patricia, hoping to make a good impression. Patricia had accepted the flowers with a stiff smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Roses," she said, turning them in her hand as if inspecting them. Simple, very modest. Elena felt small that day, but David had squeezed her hand under the table and whispered, "Don't mind her. She just takes time to warm up to people." Elena believed him. She wanted to believe him because she loved David. David had grown up in a world Elena had only ever seen from the outside. His family lived in a house with wide glass windows and polished floors that reflected the light. They hosted dinners with fine wine and expensive cutlery, where conversations moved fast and sharp, like a game she didn't know the rules to. Elena came from a different place entirely. Her parents worked long hours in their small shop, and her idea of a family dinner was eating together in a cramped kitchen, passing plates of rice and stew until nothing was left. At first, Elena thought love would bridge the gap. David loved her for her kindness, her warmth, her laughter. He told her she made him feel grounded, real, far from the coldness of his family's world. Elena believed that would be enough. But Patricia never softened. No matter what Elena did, no matter how polite, how generous, how eager to help, Patricia always found a way to remind her that she didn't belong. "Elena, dear, do you always wear your hair like that? It's quaint." "Elena, are you sure you're comfortable here? Our family has certain standards." "Elena, I just don't see what David sees in, well, never mind." Each remark was wrapped in a smile, but each cut left a mark. In the early days of their marriage, Elena tried to laugh it off. She told herself Patricia was just protective of her son, that she'd come around eventually. But years passed and nothing changed. What made it worse was David's silence. Whenever Patricia made her sly comments, Elena looked to him, waiting for him to defend her, to say, "That's enough, Mom." But more often than not, he would avoid the moment, clear his throat, change the subject, or pretend not to hear. At home, when Elena tried to talk about it, David would sigh. "Elena, you know how she is. She doesn't mean harm. Just ignore it." But ignoring it didn't make it easier. Ignoring it made Elena feel invisible. Slowly, cracks began to form in their marriage. Elena had dreamed of a partnership where she and David stood side by side, no matter what. But too often, it felt like she was standing alone while he stood behind his mother. There were nights she lay awake in their bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had made a mistake. David was kind to her in private, yes, but kindness wasn't the same as loyalty. She needed him to stand for her when it mattered, not only when the doors were closed. Elena's background only seemed to fuel Patricia's disdain. Patricia came from money, from a family where wealth was inherited like a title. Elena's father fixed shoes, her mother sold fabric at the market. Elena had worked hard to finish school, harder still to build a career. But in Patricia's eyes, none of it was enough. You don't have the right connections, Patricia once told her flatly. People like us, we build legacies. People like you just get by. Those words stayed with Elena. She never repeated them to David. What good would it do? He would only say, that's just her way of talking. Still, Elena tried. She cooked meals and invited Patricia over. She dressed carefully for family events, choosing outfits she hoped would make her look worthy. She smiled even when she wanted to cry. She thought that if she gave enough, if she showed enough grace, eventually Patricia would soften. But the truth was clear. Patricia had built a wall, and Elena was never meant to climb over it. Now, years into her marriage, Elena carried the weight of that rejection like a stone. She was tired of bending, tired of waiting for acceptance that would never come. But what hurt most of all was knowing David still hadn't chosen her. Not fully, not when it mattered. Her marriage, her dignity, her very place in that family, all of it felt fragile, balanced on a knife's edge. And deep down, Elena knew something had to give. One day, something would break. The night of David's father's birthday should have been a celebration. The family gathered in the grand dining room, the long table filled with food and wine. Laughter filled the air, but Elena felt tense, as always, knowing Patricia was watching her every move. Patricia sat at the head of the table, elegant and commanding, her voice always carrying above the others. Halfway through the meal, she turned her sharp gaze toward Elena, her smile thin and deliberate. Elena, Patricia said suddenly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't you ever feel guilty? The room went quiet. Forks stopped clinking. Elena blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. Guilty for what? She asked softly. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes glinting. For holding David back. For not giving this family what it deserves. Years of marriage and still no children. No real contribution. What have you brought to this family, Elena? Honestly, the words hit Elena like a blow. She froze, her chest tight. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Patricia had said what many of them probably thought, but never dared to voice. Elena's throat ached. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her voice caught. That's not fair, she managed, her hands trembling in her lap. Patricia's laugh was soft and cruel. Fair? Life isn't fair, my dear. Families expect certain things. A strong partner, children, someone who adds value. You try, I suppose. But trying doesn't always mean succeeding. Elena turned to David, her eyes pleading. She needed him. Just one word. Just one sign that he was on her side. But David looked down at his plate, pushing food around with his fork. His silence was louder than Patricia's words. The humiliation burned through her. Every eye in the room seemed to pierce her, waiting, judging. Elena swallowed hard and pressed her lips together. If she spoke now, her voice would crack. If she cried, Patricia would win. Inside, something broke. Something she had been holding back for years. Patricia's insult was more than just cruel. It was a line crossed, a wound too deep to ignore. And David's silence was the final betrayal. Elena sat quietly, her face calm, but inside she made a vow. Enough. She would no longer sit at this table and let Patricia strip her dignity piece by piece. She would no longer wait for David to stand up for her. As the dinner continued, she barely tasted the food. Her mind raced. Patricia thought she was weak, someone who could be humiliated again and again without fighting back. David thought silence would keep the peace. They were both wrong. Elena smiled faintly when someone tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but behind that smile, her decision was already made. This was the night she stopped being quiet. This was the night she decided she would take back her place, her voice, her worth. Patricia didn't know it yet, but her cruel words had lit a fire. And Elena, for the first time, felt its strength burning inside her. The morning after that painful dinner, Elena woke up with her chest still heavy, but something inside her had changed. She didn't cry the way she usually did when Patricia's words cut too deep. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the light slipping through the curtain, and whispered to herself no more. David stirred beside her. You're up early, he murmured. Elena turned to him. David, last night, why didn't you say anything? She humiliated me in front of everyone. You just sat there. David rubbed his face, avoiding her eyes. You know how my mother is. If I'd argued with her, it would have made things worse. Worse for who? Elena asked sharply. For me or for you? The silence between them stretched. David finally muttered, Let's not fight about this, Elena. He pulled the blanket over his head, as if hiding from the truth. For the first time, Elena felt something colder than anger. She felt distance. A wide, aching gap between them. Days turned into weeks, and Elena no longer swallowed her words. When Patricia made sly comments at family gatherings, Elena pushed back. At a Sunday lunch, Patricia said casually, I suppose some women are just not cut out for motherhood. Elena looked straight at her. And some women are not cut out for kindness. I guess we all have our flaws. The table went silent. Patricia's smile faltered for a second before she quickly recovered. But Elena noticed the flash of surprise in her. For once, she hadn't gotten the last word. Still, Patricia wasn't the kind of woman to let things go. She began whispering behind Elena's back, telling other family members that Elena was disrespectful, ungrateful, even dangerous to the family's reputation. Elena overheard fragments of conversations, an aunt telling another, "Patricia says Elena is difficult, she doesn't know her place." It stung, but Elena didn't shrink. The more Patricia tried to silence her, the more Elena's voice grew steadier. But with each clash, David grew more distant. He came home later from work, claimed he was tired, avoided conversations about his mother. One night, Elena asked, "Do you even see what she's doing to me?" David sighed. "You're making this bigger than it is. My mother is just protective. Maybe if you tried harder." Elena cut him off, her voice trembling with fury. "I have tried harder. I've bet myself until I barely recognize who I am. And you, David, you let her treat me like I'm nothing. How much harder do you expect me to try?" David didn't answer. He left the room instead, the sound of the door closing echoing through the house. That night, Elena cried, but not out of weakness. Her tears were sharp, fueled by the realization that she wasn't just fighting Patricia, she was fighting her husband's silence too. Then, slowly, pieces of truth began to reveal themselves. At a family brunch, Elena sat quietly while the others chatted. She noticed Patricia pulling one of David's brothers, Michael, aside. Their voices were low, but Elena caught enough. "You know the company can't handle another scandal," Patricia hissed. "We'll keep this quiet, but if anyone finds out about those missing funds, it could destroy everything." Michael nodded quickly, glancing around nervously. Elena's heart skipped. Missing funds? Scandal? Patricia, who held herself as the pillar of dignity, hiding something? Over the next weeks, Elena listened more carefully, observing the cracks in the family's perfect picture. She learned that Patricia had been covering up debts from the family business for years, shifting blame, making excuses. She also noticed how Patricia favored Michael over David, giving him more responsibility, more praise, while criticizing David at every turn. It was clear now, Patricia's judgment wasn't about standards or dignity. It was about control. She built her power on the family's silence, just as she expected Elena to stay quiet. But Elena was no longer willing to be silent. One evening, when Patricia made another sly jab about her uselessness, Elena leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "You seem very sure about who adds value to this family. But maybe if others knew the truth about how the company is really run, they'd have a different opinion." Patricia's face stiffened. "What are you implying?" Elena smiled faintly. "I think you know." For the first time, Patricia's mask cracked. She quickly moved on to another topic, but Elena saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. It gave her strength. The tension only grew heavier after that. Patricia tried harder to turn everyone against Elena, telling relatives she was arrogant, that she was stirring up trouble. Some began to keep their distance. A cousin avoided her at a party. An uncle gave her a cold look. Elena felt the isolation like a weight pressing on her chest. Even David seemed farther away than ever, caught between his mother and his wife but leaning toward the side he had always chosen, silence. There were nights Elena sat alone in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the window, wondering if she was losing everything, her marriage, her place in this family, even herself. But each time she remembered Patricia's words, each time she recalled the shame and the laughter at her expense, she felt her resolve harden. She would not let Patricia win. The pressure was almost unbearable, but Elena clung to the small victory. The way Patricia's eyes flashed when Elena stood her ground, the nervous glances Michael gave whenever finances were mentioned, the way some family members whispered more carefully when she was near. Patricia had built her kingdom on silence, but Elena was learning to speak. And soon, she would no longer be speaking in hints. She was gathering her strength, waiting for the right moment. She was close to breaking, yes, but she was also closer than ever to rising. The dining room was glowing with soft golden light, candles flickering against the tall windows. Patricia had arranged another family dinner, one of those nights meant to show unity and strength. But Elena knew better. These dinners were stages, and Patricia always made sure she was the star. Elena had dressed carefully that night. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, her hair brushed back neatly. She wasn't there to impress anyone, she was there to end something. From the very start, Patricia's voice carried across the table, loud and controlling. She asked Michael about his work at the family company, praising him for holding things together. She laughed at one cousin's joke, leaned in to whisper to another. And then, like clockwork, her eyes landed on Elena. "So, Elena," Patricia said, her smile sharp, "tell us again about that little job of yours. What is it you do? It's just part-time, isn't it? I suppose it keeps you busy, at least." There was a ripple of discomfort around the table. Everyone had seen this before. Patricia's little digs, her cruel humor at Elena's expense. Usually, Elena swallowed the pain, smiled politely, and kept quiet. But not tonight. Elena set down her fork, her movements calm. Actually, Patricia, she said softly, her voice steady but clear, I think it's time we talk about what really keeps you busy. Patricia blinked, her smile faltering. Excuse me? Elena leaned forward, her eyes locked on her mother-in-law. You've spent years telling everyone I don't belong, that I'm not worthy of this family. But maybe the family deserves to know what you've been hiding. The room went silent. A fork clattered against a plate somewhere, but no one moved. What nonsense are you speaking? Patricia snapped. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. She had spent weeks gathering this. Quiet conversations, overheard details, documents David had left lying around without noticing. She laid the papers neatly on the table, sliding them toward the center. These are records of the company accounts, Elena said. Funds shifted without explanation. Debt hidden behind fake reports. Payments made under Michael's name, but authorized by. Michael's face went pale. Patricia's hand froze on her wine glass. Elena's voice didn't waver. You've been covering up the company's debts for years, Patricia. Praising Michael while protecting him from the consequences. All the while, you sit here and humiliate me, calling me small, useless, unworthy. Tell me, who really doesn't belong at this table? Gasps broke around the room. One of David's sisters whispered, Is this true? Another uncle leaned forward, frowning at the papers. Patricia's mask cracked. Her face flushed red, and her voice rose. You dare come into my house and accuse me of lies? This is manipulation. She's trying to turn you all against me. Elena didn't flinch. No, Patricia. I don't have to turn anyone against you. The truth speaks for itself. You built your power on silence. But I won't be silent anymore. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. David, are you going to let her speak to me this way? She is your wife, but I am your mother. All eyes turned to David. He sat frozen, torn between two worlds. Elena looked at him, her gaze steady but filled with pain. For once, she wasn't begging. She wasn't pleading. She was simply standing, unshaken. David opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hand trembled as he set down his glass. For years, he had avoided choosing. But now, the truth was in front of him, undeniable. Mom, he said finally, his voice low. Is it true? Patricia's face twisted. How dare you even ask me that? I built this family. I held everything together while your father was sick. And this woman, comes in here and poisons you against me. Tears glistened in Elena's eyes, but she refused to look away. I didn't poison anyone. You did this yourself, Patricia. You humiliated me to keep control. But tonight, everyone sees you for who you are. The room erupted. Relatives spoke over one another, some in shock, others demanding answers. Michael tried to defend himself, but stumbled over his word. Patricia shouted, her voice breaking. You will regret this, Elena. But Elena didn't shout back. She sat quietly, her chin lifted, her dignity intact. For the first time, she wasn't the victim. She was the one holding the power. David stared at her, his expression torn with guilt and realization. He saw his wife's strength laid bare, and he saw his mother's cruelty exposed. The dinner that was meant to humiliate Elena had turned into Patricia's undoing. The balance had shifted. The truth, long buried, was out in the open. Elena felt her heart pounding, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was freedom. For the first time, she had spoken and everyone had heard. And nothing in that family would ever be the same again. The house was quiet after that dinner, but Elena's mind was not. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to David breathe beside her. His silence at the table still hurt, but she couldn't ignore what had happened. Patricia's mask had cracked, and for once, the truth had stood taller than the insults. In the days that followed, the family began to shift. Whispers spread quickly, as they always did. Some relatives who used to avoid Elena now looked at her with a new kind of respect. An aunt called her quietly, saying, You were brave, Elena. I wish I had spoken up years ago. Even one of David's brothers, who had always sided with Patricia, admitted, She's been hiding too much for too long. Patricia tried, of course, to control the story. She told anyone who would listen that Elena had twisted things, that she was bitter, that she wanted to tear the family apart. But this time, fewer people believed her. The papers Elena had shown were too clear, and the memory of Patricia's rage at the table was too fresh. For Elena, the respect felt good, but it wasn't enough. What mattered now was her own peace. She had spent years bending, trying to fit into a place that was never meant for her. She couldn't go back to that. One evening, she sat with David in the living room. He looked tired, older somehow, as if the weight of everything had finally settled on him. Elena, he said quietly, I should have defended you. I should have done it a long time ago. She looked at him, her heart heavy but steady. Yes, you should have. He flinched at her honesty. For years, she had softened her words, protected his feelings while ignoring her own. Not anymore. I don't know how to fix this, David admitted. I don't know how to fix us. Elena folded her hands in her lap. Maybe you can't. Maybe the only thing left to do is decide what kind of man you want to be. Because I know what kind of woman I am now. I will not live in silence again. I will not be humiliated and pretend it's love. David looked at her, his eyes wet, but he didn't argue. He had no words left. That night, Elena made her choice. She wasn't leaving her worth in anyone else's hands, not Patricia's, not David. If her marriage survived, it would be because respect was finally given. And if it didn't, she would still stand tall, because she had finally found herself. Weeks passed, and the family dinners changed. Patricia no longer controlled the room the way she once had. Her words didn't land with the same power. People questioned her, pushed back, asked her for proof instead of taking her word. She had lost her grip. And Elena? She no longer sat quietly at the table. She spoke when she had something to say. She laughed freely, not caring if Patricia approved. She carried herself with a confidence that made people notice. Her strength even inspired others. One cousin confided that she wanted to leave a toxic relationship, but had been too afraid. Seeing you stand up for yourself, it gave me courage, she told Elena. Elena smiled gently. She hadn't meant to be an example. She had only meant to survive. But survival had turned into something stronger, freedom. At home, things with David were not the same. They were trying carefully, but Elena no longer begged for his love or his defense. She spoke her truth plainly, and whether David could rise to meet it was his decision, not hers. For the first time in years, she felt light. She wasn't waiting for Patricia's approval. She wasn't waiting for David's protection. She wasn't waiting for anyone to tell her she belonged. She knew it already. Elena had entered that family as a timid outsider, desperate to be accepted. Now she stood as a woman who had faced humiliation, betrayal, and silence, and turned them into fire. And though the scars would remain, she carried them not as shame, but as proof of her strength. She was no longer afraid of Patricia, no longer afraid of rejection. She had chosen herself, and that, she realized, was the... One quiet afternoon, Elena sat alone in the garden, the sunlight warming her face. The roses Patricia once mocked for being too simple bloomed all around her, bright and proud. She touched one gently, smiling at the memory. It struck her how much had changed. Not long ago, she would have replayed Patricia's insults in her head, wondering how to be better, how to win approval that never came. She had lived in fear of not being enough. But now, those words no longer held power. The humiliation that once broke her had become the fire that rebuilt her. Patricia's cruelty had forced her to see herself clearly, to stop searching for worth in someone else's eyes. She had thought silence was survival, but she had learned that silence was a prison. Speaking up had set her free. Her marriage was uncertain, her place in the family still fragile, but none of that scared her anymore. For the first time, she was not defined by them. She was defined by herself. Elena breathed deeply, the air sharp and sweet. She felt taller somehow, even as she sat still. She remembered the night Patricia asked her, "What have you brought to this family?" And she almost laughed now. She had brought strength. She had brought courage. She had brought the truth. And more than anything, she had brought herself, the woman she had always been, only now unafraid to show it. She whispered to the roses, as if the garden itself needed to hear it. When you know your worth, no one can take it away. For the first time in a long time, Elena felt free. Truly free. And she knew, no matter what came next, she would never bow her head again. Hey besties, thanks so much for watching till the end. If you loved Elena's journey from humiliation to empowerment, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and of course, subscribe for more stories. Your support keeps us going. See you in the next one, where betrayal takes a shocking turn. Her friends invited everyone except her to their girls' trip, so she booked one seat beside. Stay tuned. Bye.